He was a 27-year-old Marine Corps fighter pilot stationed at Midway Island in late December of 1941. His job, along with his squadron mates from VMF 221, was to defend Midway Atoll from a Japanese invasion if it came. His name was Marion Carl, the first ace in the United States Marine Corps during World War II. Now, it all started at the Battle of Midway, which was fought between June 4th and June 7th, 1942. This was the battle which stopped the Japanese expansion in the Pacific. This was also Carl's first time in combat. Now, at Midway, Carl's squadron had received a shipment of new F-4F Grumman fighters. However, not all the fighter pilots received this new fighter plane. Of the 25 aircraft VMF 221 put into the air on June 4th, 15 were shot down and only 10 fighters landed safely. Marion Carl survived that first battle and was credited with shooting down Mitsubishi Zero. At this point, Carl was one of a handful of fighter pilots in the Pacific who had gained some experience in air combat. Now, at the end of the Battle of Midway, Carl and what remained of his squadron returned to Hawaii. It was in Hawaii Carl was transferred to VMF 223 under the command of Major John L. Smith. Now, the squadron was deployed to Guadalcanal on August 20th, 1942. They were the first Marine Air Unit to engage the Japanese from the island's airbase at Henderson Field. So why was Guadalcanal important? Well, the Japanese were constructing an airfield on the island which would have been able to interdict supplies and communication routes between the U.S., Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the Marines invaded the island on August 7th, 1942 and quickly captured the unfinished airfield. The first planes to land at Henderson was a PBY Catalina bomber on August 12th. On August 20th, 31 Marine aircraft, F-4F Wildcat fighters and SBD Dauntless dive bombers were launched by the USS Long Island from south of Guadalcanal, forming the field's first permanent air contingent. The Cactus Air Force was born. Now, more planes would join the Cactus Air Force. Army, Marines, Navy. The Cactus Air Force, as it was called, was in fact the code name for the island itself. Those early days saw major fighting to take back the airfield. The men were under constant bombardment from the Imperial Navy, the Imperial Japanese Air Force, and under constant attack from the Imperial Japanese Army to take back the airfield, as I said. It was hell on earth. Now, the living conditions for the pilots and ground crew were just as bad. There were no permanent living quarters. Ground crews and pilots were quartered in mosquito-infested coconut groves that flooded when it rained, and it rained on Guadalcanal. The tents were just mud floors. It was a hellhole that Marion Carl and VMF 223 landed on August 20th, 1942. Now, in his oral history for the U.S. Naval Institute, Carl described Henderson Airfield and their supply problems. We didn't have much of a field there then. Henderson Field was pretty much pitted. We lost some planes on landings and takeoffs, particularly if we tried to take off at night. Now, as we did a couple of times. We also seemed to be right on the borderline for fuel and ammunition most of the time. Sometimes we had supplies for only 24 hours ahead of time, particularly at the time of the Battle of Salvo Island. Now, the Navy was skittish about bringing anything in there at all. They didn't want to lose their ships. So we had to get it all by air, and some days we would have only 6 planes in commission. Now, Carl's first combat came on August 24th. VMF 223 took off to intercept a group of Japanese bombers. They were a mixture of Nakajima B-5N2 Kate bombers and twin-engines G4M1 Betty bombers. Now, Carl shot down 4 aircraft that day, making him the first Marine Corps ace of World War II. Remember, he got one at Midway earlier. Now, the squadron shot down at least 12 enemy aircraft that day. Major Smith, the squadron commander, he claimed 20 aircraft shot down. Now, on August 26, just 2 days later, Carl was in the air again. This time, he and his squadron mates tangled with an A-6M Zeke, or Zeeks, also known as Zeros. This was a fast and maneuverable aircraft that could outmaneuver the F-4F Wildcat. It could outturn and outclimb a Wildcat easily. In his oral history, Carl described the maneuverability of a Zero. I was just amazed, for instance, that the first one I jumped went by me. He got by me so fast that I didn't have a prayer of following him. He turned so quick, the airplanes were so light and so maneuverable that they could make an F-4F look real stupid. Now, right then and there, I said, I will never, ever try to maneuver with the Zero, not for more than 1 or 2 turns. If I can't get him in the first turn or two, I'm going to get the hell out of there. Otherwise, he's going to be on my tail. I won't be able to get away from him. I'm going to get shot down. On that day, Carl shot down 2 Zeros, one of which was Lieutenant J.G. Junichi Sasai. Now, as Carl was in the landing pattern for Henderson Field, Sasai got on Carl's tail and was lining up his kill shot. The anti-aircraft gunners, seeing what was happening, opened fire on Sasai's Zero. Sasai overshot Carl's plane and took off, only to reverse course and come back at Carl from above. At this point, Carl pulled into a near vertical climb, pushing his F-4F to maximum power, while simultaneously hand-cranking his landing gear back up. Now, it took 32 revolutions to get the gear up and locked. Now, Carl tracked that Zero for a deflection shot. Now, that's when you shoot ahead of a moving target so that the bullets will converge on the target at a future point. It's also called leading your target. If you missed the Zero would surely outmaneuver Carl's F-4F. Now, Carl's .450 caliber Browning machine guns found their mark, though. The enemy fighter exploded, showering parts along the beach. Now, it didn't take long, though, for the island to take its toll on the men and pilots of VMF 223. The Marines fighting to defend Henderson Field, as well as the pilots and the air group personnel, were living off of captured Japanese supplies for about 2 weeks or so. Eating captured Japanese rice combined with living conditions made it the perfect breeding ground for malaria, dysentery, dengue fever, and fungal infections or any other disease the jungle could throw at them. Now, Carl himself said he was never sick while on Guadalcanal. However, many of the pilots did come down with diarrhea, as well as an assortment of jungle diseases. It was a hellhole of unimaginable proportions. Now, it was in that hellhole that Carl and his fellow pilots fought a deadly duel for control over the skies of Guadalcanal. Over a period of 48 days, Carl shot down 15.5 enemy aircraft, bringing his total to 16.5 enemy aircraft. After being relieved from Guadalcanal, Captain Marion Carl was sent on a nationwide bond tour. It was during this tour that he met his wife, 19-year-old model Edna Curvin. Now, by July of '43, Carl was promoted to major and reformed VMF 223, taking command of it. In November of '43, VMF 223 took part in the campaign against the Japanese naval air bastion at Rabaul on New Britain. Now, Major Carl was able to add 2 more kills to his credit before events of the day took control of his fate. In January of '44, Marine ace Gregory Bollington, with 26 aerial victories, was shot down and captured. Then Robert Hansen, 25 aerial victories, was killed in February of '44. Major Carl's tour was cut short. The powers that be decided to get Carl out of harm's way. He was assigned to the first class of the Naval Test Pilot School at Patuxent River, Maryland, where he remained through the end of the war. Now, besides being a test pilot, Carl commanded other units, including a reconnaissance squadron based on Taiwan in '54. He led missions over mainland China, photographing communist forces along the coast. Now, during the Vietnam War, Carl was promoted to Brigadier General and took the 1st Marine Brigade to Da Nang, South Vietnam. Now, despite his seniority, he repeatedly flew combat missions in helicopter gunships and jet fighters. After a long and distinguished career, Major General Marion Carl retired from the Marine Corps with 38 years of service in 1973. Now, Marion Carl and his wife, Edna, settled in Roseburg, Oregon. HistoryNet.com describes Marion Carl's retirement. In retirement, he settled into a life as an avid outdoorsman in his native Oregon near Roseburg, enjoying hunting, fishing, and hiking. Those who met him then were usually astonished to learn about his military background, in part because he was extraordinarily quiet, almost to the point of shyness. In fact, Carl described aerial combat and milking cows in the same tone. He answered the phone with, "This is Marion," and seldom, if ever, did he describe himself as General Carl. Marion Carl served his country for 38 years in war and in peace. He earned his retirement and a place in the sun. As one of America's heroes, unfortunately, fate stepped in again. Sunday, June 28, 1998, a drifter walking along the North Umpqua River Road where Marion and Edna lived decided he needed some money in a car. This waste of DNA was armed with a shotgun that he had stolen from D&D Towing, a Roseburg vehicle towing business, about a week earlier. He picked the Carl's residence to get the money and a car. Now, Marion had gone to bed around 9:30. His wife Edna stayed up and was reading. A half hour later, Edna was startled when the side door was kicked in. A useless punk kid wearing big sunglasses, holding a sawed-off shotgun and a German Shepherd dog by his side, shouted at her to get her hands up. Now, it was at this point 82-year-old Marion came out of the bedroom. Seeing that his wife was being held at gunpoint, Marion Carl did the only thing a husband could do. He lunged at the punk to disarm him and protect his wife. The shotgun went off, grazing Edna on the side of the head. This punk then turned the shotgun on Marion. The blast was fatal. A Marine Corps legend's life was snuffed out by an insignificant punk. The assailant took about $400 in cash and the keys to the car. Now, Edna was able to identify the killer, who was well known to the Rosenberg police force, as well as the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. It was about a week later in Pasadena, California, this sorry excuse for a human being was arrested and extradited back to Oregon to face first-degree murder charges. Now, 11 months later, on May 5th, 1999, this sorry excuse for a human being was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The prosecuting attorney stated, "The defendant was a psychopath who would kill again. He punched his mother. He taunts his grandmother. He tortures animals. Nobody can relate with any kind of precision why he turned into this, but that's what he turned into." The jury took about 9 hours over a 2-day period to agree to the death penalty. Now, as the sentence was delivered, the defendant just swallowed hard, according to the local papers. Now, this gave him the distinction of being the youngest person on death row at the age of 19. Now, you might have noticed I have not used the name of the murderer, and I will not, because what he did was despicable, and giving him any kind of recognition is sickening to me. Now, unfortunately, the sentence was changed to life imprisonment due to the fact that it was not disclosed during the penalty phase of the trial that he had been abused as a child, so he was resentenced to life in prison. Now, in the United States, the problem is life does not mean life in some cases. The Carl family does not care if he is put to death or rots in prison for the rest of his life. They just don't want him walking out of prison a free man at some point in the future. You know, you can sum this up with one of Marion Carl's close friends who served with him in the Marine Corps when he said, "The ruling is a travesty of justice." I know people who have had super bad childhoods who became great citizens, he said. He had an opportunity to go straight or do what he wanted and let the chips fall where they may. Marion Carl was 82 when this tragic event happened. He put his life on the line over and over again in service to our country. He and his wife Edna deserved a peaceful retirement and to live out his full life. This is not the way a national hero should die, at the hands of a 19-year-old punk kid who will never understand that duty, honor, and sacrifice are not just words, but have actual meanings to men like Major General Marion Eugene Carl. Well, I hope you found this interesting. Hey, if you did, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and also leave a comment below. That basically gets the algorithm to start sending my videos out to more people. Thank you for watching.